Welcome, everyone. This is a webinar from Exzion Solutions, and it's about transformational indicators. Many of our clients are on this agile journey, and they're going through this journey and they're wondering, are we there yet? Well, that's not always the right question to ask. It's better to ask, are we making progress towards our transformational goals? So what we've done today is we've put together a webinar. We are joined with Reid Lowery, who's an Agile practitioner who has over 40 years experience helping major organizations go through this Agile transformation process. He's going to walk us through asking the right questions to determine if you are making progress towards those goals. Thank you, Reid, for taking your time to join us.
Thanks, Jennifer. Really appreciate your time. So let's talk a little bit about some of those things that you alluded to, which are we making any progress? And it's important when we start looking at these things that we're measuring that we dissect them if we're going to introduce them into three types of predictive levers or metrics that can be measured no matter where you're at. So whether it's at the team level, the middle management level, or even the C-suite. So let's take a look at that. So the first thing you're going to want to do in trying to identify are we making progress is understand what you're doing that's triggering behaviors. So what are those behavioral levers that you're tripping? Once you've done that, try and identify a metric that doesn't create waves. In other words, there's the effect that you can cause by trying to measure things that are outside of the scope of an agile transformation. So be careful about that metric. And then ultimately set a simple target when you first start out. I'm assuming that right now you've already got these. And if not, we can help you with that. So let's take a look first at the lower level at the most common metrics that people utilize as indicators. So the first thing we look at are what are some of those behaviors that show we may actually be making progress. So we've historically utilized lagging indicators in measuring anything, and those are very common and very easy for people to adopt. So it's important to make sure some of these are still in place, even when we introduce some of our leading indicators. The first one to look at is, are we improving on how quickly we cycle through getting an idea? So from ideation to actually delivering. So getting it out there. So ideation to inception. How long does it take? That we typically call cycle time. And hopefully that's compressing and getting shorter. The next one we look at is code quality. One of the things that any agile transformation strives to do is ensure that quality is job one. So you can introduce agility, but if you're compromising quality, there's no point. So always establish that. And then are you getting better ROI on your IT projects? Overall, you should be seeing an improvement in your profitability with what you're delivering. The, Another indicator that says we're on the right track is we're actually deconstructing silos. So what I mean by that is instead of having dev teams and test teams, we have fully integrated teams that are cross-functional and help us get things done. The reason we do that is ultimately things get delivered quicker with fewer defects, and ultimately the quality and the satisfaction for our customers is elevated. And then last but not least, we want to make sure that our planning is not only done coordinated with other teams that are involved, but we also want to take feedback at a regular cadence and integrate that into our backlog so that we can actually improve over time. So those are historic indicators that a lot of organizations are already using. Some leading indicators might be helpful. What we look at here is, do you have teams that iterate and develop on rapid cadence? So what we mean by this is, are they delivering something every week or every couple weeks? Not monthly. That's typically outside the window of an iterative cadence. It can be initially, but it's important to move that a lot quicker. The other thing we look at is, do we have a way of tracking the work in progress? Historically, when we first introduced lean and agility, we used 3x5 cards up on the wall. These days, there's all sorts of software products, whether it's Jira, version 1, or Rally. These are all great products that we can do that with. So make sure that you have a way of tracking the work and there's some accountability and ownership with that. And then ultimately, are your teams following agile practices? And you can go to the agilemanifesto.org and actually take a look at what that really entails. So, managers at the lowest levels that are working with teams should be looking at these types of indicators. The next thing we look at is, what are our executive indicators? What are those behaviors for an organization as a whole? So it's important to look at this because there's a number of things our executives should be really measuring. So the first one we look at is, do we have alignment across the organization? So how frequently and often are stakeholders collaborating on prioritization? Historically, it would be an arm wrestling match, or we'd move towards who had the best or highest title in the room, and they would get their pet projects addressed. What we want to do is try and do a collaborative planning event, and we have ways of doing that in agility. Another thing we look at is, are our agile practices actually growing? So, do we have a way of making sure that not only do people get trained when they first come on board, but we're improving and sharpening their tool set on a regular, recurring cadence? And do you have specific leaders that are leading your agility and helping people do that? The other thing we look at is, are we aligning and supporting across the organization? One of the biggest flaws that we have is agility is perceived as an IT thing. It's not. Agility is what a company and an organization is. So it's important that not only do we have communication top down with the vision for the company and the organizations, but what's our current strategy and how are we moving forward on that? And how frequently is that communicated? Executives should be involved with the teams minimally on the planning and quarterly cadence events, but it's important to see, what are the teams and that your organization delivering every couple of weeks. So being involved and being engaged is a quick way to start ratcheting up how people feel about the transformation. One of the other things we look at is, people typically in an agile transformation are much happier than what they were traditionally. In my experience, working with teams and organizations that have never had a dose of agility, not only does this rejuvenate careers, this changes the net satisfaction score for your employees, and that suddenly becomes not from a good place to work to a great place to work. So part of this is the behaviors that agility cultivates. Again, going to that Agile manifesto and learning some of those behaviors and the principles that we endorse, well, that will get you there. The other thing, this goes back to what we talked about with management, is we want to make sure there's this, how do we learn from our mistakes? And then quickly, how do we move forward and improve on that? So again, this constant reflection on, what are we doing? How are we doing it? Are we getting better at it? And then ultimately sharing that across the organization, being transparent about that and communicating, we're succeeding or we're stumbling, and then everybody being accountable as a group for making sure that we do better as it, is one of those executive indicators that we want to encourage. It becomes a no fault zone where we're actually encouraging executives to get out there and say, hey, we know this didn't go exactly as planned. Here's some of the things that we've observed. What do you observe? And then collaborating on solving the issue and then building it into how are we going to do this next. Again, iterative and incremental delivery across the organization. So not just at the team or the product level, but across the organization. Are projects currently running and concurrently, and are they aligned? They may not necessarily be on the same cadence, but are they delivering near the same time? And that's important to understand. So those 6 executive indicators are critical towards making sure we are making some progress and then working with your management to help lead the charge in getting better at it. Now, from the C suite, one of the things we want to look at are some early warning indicators. And one of the things that we talk about are things that are fake or false indicators. There's also this concept of what we call vanity metrics. So, a great example of vanity metrics has to deal with this metric of measuring velocity. So, if you're familiar with Agile and how we story point the work, one of the things that people can get caught up on is trying to say, oh, we need a bit more velocity. Well, I can game that system by doing that just by bumping my numbers up a notch. So instead of a 3-point story or a 30-point feature, I can make it a 5-point story or a 50-point feature. So it's important to avoid gaming the system and using vanity metrics. So one of the first things we look at as an indicator that we might have some fake indicators or false indicators are we rigid in our approach? If we're rigid in trying to adopt and trying to do things and we're not fluid in trying to adapt, that tells us that we're just going through the motions. So it's important to understand that rigidity is an indicator. One of the other things that I've run into on a regular basis is poor commitment. So I've worked recently with a group that not only right after their quarterly planning, they immediately changed their plan within the hour after planning. And that just drove their commitment out the door. So it's important that once you've done your planning, you commit to it. And if you need more time, say you need more time, but ensure that you stick with your commitments and you drive towards making that delivery. Again, the better we get at delivering good quality and getting better at being consistent and predictable, the more credibility we have, and ultimately, the more our performance improves. The other thing we look at, and this is personally, if you're in that level, if you're not aware of the process, if you're not part of the process, that's a problem. So we want you to be involved. If you're in the C suite and you're reading reports instead of participating, we want you to encourage you to come and participate. Listen, be a fly on the wall, take feedback. And it's important to be that supporter, that cheerleader, because if it's important to you, the teams, the managers, everybody in that transformation is going to say, wow, this matters to them, so it matters to me. So getting that feedback and then moving forward with that is one of those things that ensures that we improve. If we skip the feedback and we don't get it, ultimately we're failing at one of the core benefits of adopting an agile transformation. So, some leading indicators that the C suite should be aware of are the organization as a whole should be transforming. So, again, if IT is doing it, HR should be doing it, marketing should be doing it, everybody should be involved. Now, there's different approaches that we use with those areas of the business, but agility as a whole can be rolled out with the organization. And it not only makes it a common language, but it ensures everybody's on the same mission. When we ultimately look at the product behaviors and how things are being cultivated in other business functions, we want to make sure that all of those things across the organization are being integrated and planned. So again, agility as a whole needs to be the mission of the organization. I've heard it said before that banks that have adopted agility in a serious way have stopped being banks that do agility and become IT shops that do banking. So again, that's just one of those mental notes. Agility becomes what the organization will ultimately transform into. So let's sum up a few things, some key takeaways. So ultimately, are we doing what we say we're doing? So when we go back to those three levers at the beginning, make sure that you're measuring at all the levels and then comparing your scorecard across the various business units for opportunities to improve. And that's important. So make sure you're doing what you say you're doing. Are we taking feedback? And that's at all levels. Teams do it with what they call a retrospective. Programs do it with what they call an inspect and adapt workshop. It's important that even moving up into the executive and C suite, we take that feedback and try and improve the organization as a whole and collaborate with everybody to do so. And then ultimately, is everybody on the same page? Again, make sure that our cadence and metrics are reflected across all levels. And then ultimately, people are working together to collaborate and be successful. So that mission, that vision should be something everybody's aware of. And ultimately, we want to all be part of that success. Jennifer?
Great job, Reid. Thank you so much for that information. This has been enlightening. A lot of times, as we know, it's not, are we there yet? But it's making sure that we're asking the right questions to determine if we're making progress towards those transformational goals. At Exzion Solutions, we're dedicated to helping clients turn their change into value that they can use. Thank you so much.